It was a point in the city's history that would be perfect for someone impatient, or someone with something to prove or willing to take extraordinary risks, or all of that. But also someone with powerful friends and a fortune for a tailwind. It was a moment tailor-made for Donald Trump. Welcome to the Atlantic Current. I'm Tull from the Irish Politics Newsletter, and here as always with Vince Martin from Wall Street and Maine. Vincent, that quote was from Lucky Loser by a pair of New York Times reporters. This opens part 3 of our sprawling look at the pre-politics life of Donald Trump, the story that has been coloured by his political career, but one that deserves its own closer examination.
Yes, today we get into his business career, which, as we'll discuss quickly, does not get off to a promising start. When we left off part 2, Donald has graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. He's headed back to New York to work for his father's real estate business, his empire of apartment buildings across the outer boroughs of New York City, as they're known. His older brother, Fred Jr., was groomed to take over. He's on the outs. We covered his sad story in part 2. So it is 1968. Donald Trump is now the heir apparent to the Trump family fortune.
Where is he 58 years ago in 1968?
He actually moves in back home, which is kind of funny.
With his mom and dad?
With his mom and dad, which is quite funny if you kind of think about what his brand is, that he's constantly pushing himself as a self-made, hardworking, hard-charging guy. Yeah, he moves back home into the mansion in Queens, which makes sense. He has servants and a chauffeur and all this stuff. But yeah, he's home. The Vietnam War is at its height. Trump is technically eligible for the draft at this point. Once he leaves college, he no longer has a deferment. But famously, he finds a helpful podiatrist who diagnoses him with bone spurs in his heels. So he avoids the draft. His father hires him. He pays him a very high salary. He gets him a Cadillac, an American automobile that was quite high status at the time. He's named president of the company, which I'm sure looked good on the business card. But his job is not high status. He deals with tenants and repairmen and agents. He places classified ads in the newspaper. And in 1968, according to Lucky Loser, for the first time, he uses a pseudonym.
The pseudonym is John Barron.
Yeah, John Barron, sometimes spelled with one R and sometimes with two. Yeah.
Barron, obviously the name of one of his children.
Yeah, he uses a pseudonym all the way into the 1980s. When he's kind of famous, he's in the tabloids. John Barron is his imaginary spokesman, which is one of my favorite stories. Reporters will call up and he'll answer the phone as John Barron, and all the reporters are like, God, that's really weird. John Barron sounds exactly like Donald Trump. It's uncanny. On a talk show in 2016, he seems to confirm that, yeah, he actually named Barron Trump his 5th child after the pseudonym, which is just hysterical. He says something about he used the name during some great deal in Brooklyn or something, which is almost certainly not true. But there is kind of a perfect homage to Donald that you would name your kid after some imaginary deal you supposedly did under a fake name.
It might give an insight into the humours of Donald Trump, doesn't it? His kind of wacky sense of humour that he has going on rattling around his brain. I mean, he named his son after his pseudonym. I mean, he couldn't have named him something more obscure like Tull or something, could he not?
That's true. He's not deep into Irish playwrights, I guess. But yeah, it is quite funny. In this pseudonym, I think is interesting as we get into the story. I think it signals that he already at this point understands how important it is to project a certain image. He doesn't want his name in the classified ads of a newspaper out in the outer boroughs, right? He's supposed to be the guy at the top, not the guy dealing with people in classified ads. And I think, quite honestly, that's part of why he uses it. He supposedly reads an article somehow about a guy in Colorado whose name is John Barron, and he just thinks, oh, that's a great name, and instantly adopts it. Yeah, it's quite funny.
Well, he's just a glorified administrator, Vincent, isn't he? He's a guy that you hire to do the menial tasks that, the big boss man is too busy to be doing in the first place.
He's a manager, not an executive, if that makes sense. Yeah, he's not making decisions about the future of the company at all. He is managing the day-to-day operations. He has some responsibilities, certainly, but no, he's not what he will soon start claiming that he is. And he's not what he says looking back, where he's, oh, when I worked for my dad, I was doing this, I was making all these deals. No, he's not making major decisions at this point. So he wants glamour. There are stories that when he's at Penn in college, he's telling all his classmates that he's buying real estate in Philadelphia. these stories appear to be false. As we discussed earlier, he bankrolls a Broadway play.
Yes.
With his father's money. It runs for like a couple months. He loses $70,000. He does some stuff for his father. At one point, I think it's a couple years after he takes over, he does sell an apartment building in Ohio that his father's trying to get rid of. And as always, a few years later, it was a great deal. We sold it for twice what we paid for it. And actually, no, he went out there and sold it for basically almost exactly what they paid for it.
Okay.
There's just not much going on here. He moves to Manhattan in 1971.
Since moving from where he is to Manhattan, he's in Queens, yes?
Yeah.
To Manhattan, that's like moving from Dublin to Wicklow, yes? It's not far, like.
Oh, no.
Yes, I've been struck by the biographies of Trump, how much of a big deal people say it's moving from Queens to Manhattan. It's like, 10 minutes away or something?
It's a little further than that, yeah. The 45-minute subway ride, whatever it might be, from where he is, yeah. I mean, it's the same city. I mean, it's legally the same city. People who live in the city might argue that it's not. We talked about the bridge and tunnel idea and the difference between the outer boroughs of Manhattan. But no, it is geographically not a big move. I do think particularly at the time, in terms of lifestyle, it's a huge move because this is the 60s, right? The world has changed. We talked about Fred last episode. He gets married in 1962. His wife has to quit her job, right? She's a flight attendant. She gets married. No, they don't employ married women. In 1971, I think some of those mores still hold in Queens. Queens, a place like that is more family-oriented, more middle-class oriented. Those old rules still apply to some extent. When he gets to Manhattan, it's a completely different world, right? There's models in slinky dresses everywhere. He joins private clubs. He is very clearly trying to be seen with attractive women, different attractive women at many places as possible, burnish his reputation. But so geographically it's close. In 1971, they're, I think, different worlds. It's not entire exaggeration to put it that way.
So what you're saying for our Irish listeners, Queens is a bit like Bray and Manhattan's a bit like Greystones, I think is what you're trying to say there for our Irish listeners. Our American listeners won't get that reference, but it pretty much means the same thing.
But again, he's doing all these things to project an image. He is not doing that much. In 1973, that starts to change. He gets his first mention in the media. In January, the New York Times runs a feature called A Builder Looks Back and Moves Forward. And it centers more on Fred Sr., who at the time is 67. The article says that he has built a portfolio that, quote, he values at $150 million.
What's that worth today?
Little over $1 billion.
Is that all? That's not very much, is it?
I mean, we've talked before about Donald saying that he is mostly a self-made man, which is a fiction he will keep up.
You say fiction, Vincent. I say outright lie.
There's going to be a lot of those debates over the next 20 years. Yeah. Is it an exaggeration or is it just, you put it, an outright lie? Yeah.
Yes. I mean, in Ireland, because of our defamation laws, you're better off saying fiction than outright lie, to be perfectly honest.
If we could get him on the pod, he might say it wasn't a lie because he did something, right? He was, of course I'm self-made. I look at everything I did. Look at all the lies I told. But yeah, I mean, one of those lies is that he does keep up. He says his whole life, I'm a self-made man. Lucky Loser, the book we keep talking about, they got his tax returns. They point out it's just complete nonsense. Even at this time, he's 25 years old in 1971.
Whoa.
He's getting hundreds of $1,000s a year from his father, who's built all these schemes and wheezes, as you would put it.
What's he spending this money on?
He's not like profligate at this point, but he has a nice apartment in Manhattan. I don't think anyone says this in particular biography, but I do have a sense that I don't think he cooks at home very often. He's working by day and he's out at night. But it is funny that he perpetuates the self-made man myth his entire career, literally the first time that he's mentioned in the media. The article just blows that whole thing up. Oh, yeah, by the way, in modern dollars, your father was a billionaire. And the feature is about Fred, but it closes by turning to Donald. And as you would put it, it's just all lies. It says that Donald's the only child to show interest in real estate. That's probably not true. The youngest brother joins the business. The girls weren't even asked.
Okay.
It says Donald graduated first in his class. Not remotely true. Donald talks about an investment in a big, huge apartment complex that's being built. And he says, we're moving forward. They did have an investment, but it was just a tax shelter. They literally didn't own the building, but the write-offs. And Trump actually, when he's trying to get deals done later in the decade, takes officials of the city on a tour of the building and says, oh, yeah, we built that. So he actually takes the lie a step further. They say they're moving into Manhattan. No plans at the time to do that. But again, it's where Donald wants to be. If you're in Queens and you're Fred and you build a $150 million empire, when you're 67, you get a little profile in the Times in the back pages. The article, I does think, highlight 2 points. And one is what we said. In 1973, this business is not doing anything. They're telling lies because there really actually is nothing going on. There's nothing for the reporter to write about. We talked in part 1 about Fred Trump getting in a scandal and losing access to federal funding in the 1950s. He gets into another scandal in New York City. He's cut off locally. Mm-hmm. And then there's a new mayor who's a Republican, so his political connections in the Democratic Party are pretty much useless. So they try a couple projects. They really can't get anywhere going. And if anything, the business is shrinking. But the second point, which really jumps out, is that they are telling lies. So both Fred and Donald clearly are intentionally trying to create this image of Donald Trump as a huge developer, as a master builder, as a genius, which is different for Fred, who didn't do this. In the article, Fred says, quote, Donald is the smartest person I know. Everything he touches turns to gold.
Oh, God.
Yeah, which is...
You're telling this story here, but you must have mentioned lies about 20 times in the last 3 or 4 minutes.
I mean, there's a lot. It is an invention of a character, which gets back to the whole point of the story, what we're trying to focus on. Why Donald is such a fascinating story if you can step away from the politics, because it's a multi-year process of inventing a character that actually, as everybody knows, it works.
Constantly reinventing a character also, I think.
He will have to reinvent it at the start. He, in particular, with Fred's help, is pretty clear about what they're trying to present him as. They're just trying to present him as a guy who's made it, even though at this point, he's literally never completed a project. He literally has never owned anything that he's built. And one thing that is interesting is that Fred pushes the lie, because he actually didn't really do that in his business. He was a pretty sober businessman. He does put his name on things. He does have events. He does some marketing, but he's certainly nothing like Donald. There's actually an anecdote in one of the books that one of the city officials that Donald works with later, who's the son of a rich man himself, he points out like how stunned he is that Fred is so deferential to Donald and is so supportive of him because, as he points out, self-made men usually are pretty hard on their kids, right? Which is really interesting, particularly considering, as we discussed, how hard he is on his first son, on Fred Jr.
Yes, one son is going downhill pretty quickly.
Yeah.
He's hit the bottle and the other one is reaching for the stratosphere on the other hand. So he's thrown his lot in with Donald, obviously,
Yeah. If there was any doubt who won, this article pretty much ends it. And if Fred Jr. reads that quote, oh, my second son is the smartest person I know. You got to imagine just emotional torture for poor Freddie, I think.
Yes. And, probably increases his reliance on the devil's water, I suppose. It's not going to be good.
No, yeah, he's in full vicious cycle at this point. I think he gets divorced a year or two after this. But in October of 1973, in a story I think many listeners will at least be familiar with, the Trumps return to the New York Times. They are on the front page. This is not a profile. This is a very different headline. Quote, major landlord accused of anti-black bias in city. The Trump Organization, as it's now known, has been sued by the federal government's Department of Justice for discriminating in its rental practices, violating the Fair Housing Act, which had been passed only 5 years earlier. In the article, Donald, not Fred, interestingly, is quoted as saying the allegations are, quote, absolutely ridiculous. We never have discriminated, and we never would. Toll, I'll allow you to come in and perhaps add to our running count of lies.
Yes, I'd imagine that's another. I've lost track now at this stage of how many lies Donald Trump is.
It really is wild. Yeah, we're at a kind of a one lie a minute pace.
Yeah, I remember this story in particular because it actually came out during his first presidential run. It
was a big topic. Yep.
He hates black people, and I have seen nothing over the course of both his presidencies to suggest that maybe he doesn't hate them, but has a low opinion of them.
Yeah, I mean, that was a debate even before he was in politics. There were always whispers about this. And this is the the first public thing that we see. And to your point about it sticking around, Hillary Clinton brings this up in a debate in 2016. And the evidence is damning. So the state had investigated them first. They have a massive apartment complex in Brooklyn out near Coney Island, which is not the one in Sligo.
Yes, that's the one in Tongs. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But this complex has 3,700 apartments. In 1967, there are 7 that are rented by African Americans. The story that kind of got a lot of attention when Trump entered politics was that there's a superintendent who testified that he was instructed that if an African American person applied for an apartment, they were supposed to attach a piece of paper to the application with a C on it. C standing for colored. And I think that got played because it was sort of like, oh, wait, you're racist. And you're also like using a racist word that even by 1967, people had kind of realized they weren't supposed to be using.
How did he get caught, Vincent?
There are investigations. I'm not sure exactly how it gets to the feds. There's a nonprofit organization there that is basically trying to find these people out. And their work had led to another settlement a year before. Similar allegations, similar sized organization. But they would send in testers. So they would hire a black person. They'd go to the building. There was a for rent sign out front. They'd say, hey, I'd like to rent an apartment. And the superintendent would go, oh, well, actually, I just haven't taken the sign down. We just rented it an hour ago. And then the same organization would send a white person to the same building to talk to the same guy in front of the same sign. And he'd be like, oh, yeah, come on in. Yeah, it's been open for weeks. So
it's that naked. It's that. It's outright racism, for want of another word. There's no other way to describe that, though. Is there outright racism?
If you want to very narrowly defend the Trumps, here's what I would say, because I think you can put the behavior in some context. We open this with the idea that Donald Trump's life keeps colliding with all these major trends in America. And one of the big ones at the time is what's called white flight. So starting in the 1950s, white citizens are leaving urban areas. As the name suggests, they're flying out. Part of this is because the federal government has put in all these housing programs and all these support for people to buy homes. And those programs are inherently racist. So white people can move to the suburbs. They can move to Long Island, which is east of Manhattan, and get government help on their mortgage where black people can't. There's very clear institutional practices. We call it redlining, where realtors steer black buyers away from certain neighborhoods. So this is part of why white people are leaving the city. They're moving to the suburbs. Okay. There's also, again, some racism to it. There's no doubt. And then in the 1960s, there are a series of riots in Newark, New Jersey, a major city. It's only about 45 minutes from New York, and Los Angeles and Detroit. By 1970, a lot of white people in the city are just saying, we have to get out. We need to move to the suburbs.
What are the riots over, Vincent? Why are they rioting?
They all kind of have somewhat different immediate causes. They are a little bit of a remnant of the civil rights era. Some disappointment that the progress of the 50s has not been reflected in inner cities. There's anger. There's the fact that black people in those cities live in much worse conditions and things like that. As is the case with riots that happen later, whether it's 91 or 2020. Why they happen really very much depends on what your beliefs are about the people who are doing it, I think. Race is just a massive, massive issue in the country right now. And this white flight thing is real. It happens in Queens. It happens around their properties. And if you wanted to defend Fred Trump, and I mean this in the most modest way possible, I think he absolutely believes, and he may well be right, that if he starts allowing African-American tenants into his building, that he's going to lose money. If black people go in, he will have white people that move out, and that will hurt his ability to price the apartments. And we have talked about this. Fred Trump cares about money. He's a guy for whom every dollar is a point on the scoreboard. And I think when people go, oh, Fred and Donald did this because they just hated black people and they didn't want them in apartments. It might be true. And it's not defensible behavior, but given Fred's worldview, it's not a compliment, but it's true. He is a guy who is not going to take a stand on racial equality if it costs him money under any circumstances.
Right. Yeah. So if he's engaged in financial racism, but I'm going to push back against you here, Vincent, a little bit. Wasn't he arrested at a KKK rally, right? Well, which most people would say is very poor behavior at best. And at worst, outright naked racism, which has followed him through to his business practices.
That's the story that gets told. People actually don't know about that arrest, I think, until 2015. Yeah, in 1927, he's arrested at a parade of the Ku Klux Klan. Yeah, which is a racist organization founded after the Civil War in the U.S. Now, there's no evidence that Fred Sr. was in the KKK or even associated with it. There is a parade and there's altercations, evidently some of which are with spectators. So it's possible, like, he was just at the parade and he gets arrested for failure to disperse, basically failure to leave and follow the police. He's never actually detained, if I remember correctly. But the thing about that, too, that rally has nothing to do with African Americans. This is kind of the second iteration of the Ku Klux Klan. They're most infamous for terrorizing African Americans in the South after the Civil War.
Well, Vincent, there seems to have been, how shall I say this, a northern version of the KKK and a southern version of the KKK. Okay,
there is a little bit of that, yeah, and then it also kind of ebbs and flows. It goes away and then it comes back and so forth.
It's quite a fluid organization in terms of which people they're hating at which particular time. In the north, it wasn't kind of the night-riding, lynching Southern Klan of the 19th century or the civil rights era. The 1920s Klan had exploded in the north and Midwest precisely as an anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic machine. Millions of members. It had millions of members, something like, was it 4.55 million members at one stage?
It's really big that time around. And that's something that we kind of skip over in our history because we go, oh, we're a nation of immigrants and all these people came and it was great. And when immigration from those countries peaked, it caused huge societal disruption. It caused a lot of anger. People said they didn't want Catholics. People said, all these Poles and Slavs and Italians and Irish were second class, genetically inferior, would never assimilate. Fortunately, they did assimilate, and everybody in America learned their lesson not to accuse immigrants of not assimilating and being second-class citizens. No one will ever make that mistake ever again, and certainly no one involved in this story at all would ever do such a thing.
No, history not rhyming but repeating, or repeating not rhyming.
Yeah.
So it was essentially, that KK rally was a Protestant versus Catholic street brawl, which doesn't make it any more okay either, by the way.
There's flyers for the march that the Post find, and it literally says they're protecting, quote, native-born Protestants who, quote, had been assaulted by Roman Catholic police of New York City. But yeah, I mean, this story, as you said, particularly when he gets into politics, people use this story, the KKK and the investigation. Oh, he was a racist the whole time. We knew it from the jump. Now, again, modest defenses here. I forget the source. I apologize. But someone in 2015 covering this Department of Justice action in 1973, they make the point that actually once Trump's running his own buildings, he never has any allegation. When he runs Trump Tower, for instance, there are no media reports that he discriminates against tenants. And this is true kind of throughout his portfolio, appears to be true in Atlantic City when he runs casinos, for instance. Getting into his views on race is another 12-episode podcast series that I don't know that we necessarily wanted. Again, it's a very modest offense, and you can't just wave away the behavior. Oh, it was a different time. It wasn't that different a time. But all the circumstantial evidence we have suggests that at least one motivator for Fred Sr. is money. And all the evidence we have at that time is Donald is not crossing Fred Sr. But the lawsuit has another effect and far-reaching consequences. At some point before it's filed, and there are different stories, Donald Trump met a lawyer named Roy Cohn. Who we introduced briefly in part one. Yeah, you called him cartoonishly evil.
Yeah, and he continues to be so, even though up to this day.
Oh, yeah. I said he was like a Bond villain's lawyer. But yeah, and he had made his name in the 1950s. He's part of the Red Scare. He's the chief counsel for Joe McCarthy, who is trying to root all these alleged communists out of the federal government. Yet another mistake that we fortunately will never make again.
No,
but he's also, to give an idea of his character, he's also part of what becomes known as the Lavender Scare. They moved from communists to gay people
Oh, right.
Yeah, under the Eisenhower administration, anyone they think is gay, they try and throw out of government. He leads that, even though he's a closeted gay person.
Yeah, that's not the first time that's happened in history either, you know.
For sure. Yeah, he's not unique. I suppose that's true. But his single-mindedness, I think, and he's just not an ethical guy. He winds up getting disbarred. He's accused of stealing money from clients. He is just constantly in trouble, constantly in the media, constantly bending or just outright breaking the rules. Trump, in his personal life, Cohn very clearly has a huge impact on how he handles his business. We said the DOJ brought a major discrimination case earlier. The defendant in that case just settled immediately. They agreed to a settlement, which is standard in the U.S. The government does these settlements, and the boilerplate language is they neither admit nor deny the charges.
Yes, without culpability, yes.
Yeah. You can say that you weren't found guilty, but you also can't go out and say that you were innocent or you were exonerated.
We have cases of that in Ireland, and it's usually with the health service executive. They'll make a settlement and say without liability, you know, and that kind of jazz.
Yeah.
But, you know, in Ireland at the moment, I think over the last 10 years, I think the figures about the HSE has made like 5 billion euros in settlements without liability. 5 billion without liability, of course, yeah.
That was a big thing with our financial crisis when the banks settled. All their settlements were the same deal, you know, neither admit nor deny. And it appears when this first happens, the Trump organization strategy is going to be settled too. But Cohn gets in Trump's ear and he says, you can't take this line down. You got to go on offense. And this is Cohn's strategy for life, everything. Attack, right? And if you get to the art of the deal or Trump's political career, right, very clearly he has picked this up. He adopts this as his own strategy. So the Trumps, instead of settling, I mean, if you look at the evidence, you would not want to be the Trump organization lawyer trying to defend them in court. They have testimony up and down the ladder. They don't settle. Instead, the Trumps countersue the federal government for $100 million, claiming that the government has made false statements. And Trump gets in the media. He's holding press conferences about how unfair this is. He claims that the lawsuit is because the federal government wants him to take tenants on welfare, which is not true and also kind of a little bit of a racist dog whistle, a lot of people think. They spend almost 2 years. Donald Trump suing the federal government goes about as well as you would expect. The suits are repeatedly tossed out of court. They finally agree to a settlement. In Lucky Loser, they argue, I'm not sure that's 100% right, but they argue pretty vehemently that the settlement that Trump gets is actually way worse than the one he would have had if he had just shut his mouth and signed the deal in 1973. And instead, they just spend 18 months in the newspapers with articles about how they're racist landlords.
Yes, and that scenario is not unique to the United States. Very famously, anybody that goes up against the revenue commissioners in Ireland usually finds out to come out much, much worse rather than just taking a slap on the wrist. You know, they go to court and go, well, it's actually much worse now for you, pal. That's the end of that.
But he learns another lesson from Cohn, which is that when you lose, you just tell everybody you won. Then you yell it really loud. And again, another strategy. He goes out and he says, oh, yeah, we won the case. They didn't find us guilty, which is technically true. But, you know, again, as we're saying, not really true. And he maintains that story into the 2016 campaign. When Clinton brings it up, he goes, oh, we never admitted to guilt. Well, that's not the point here.
There's two things I want to touch on there, Vincent. First of all, Roy Cohn. This is where the allegations of very shady behavior and his links to underworld crime in New York come from, isn't it? Roy Cohn is the genesis for that.
For sure. Cohn has a lot of connections, and there are all sorts of convoluted allegations as Trump's career takes off in the 80s that he's connected to the mafia in various ways. Absolutely.
Would it be fair to say it's very hard to get anything built in New York without the trade unions at that time?
Yeah, that's one of the defenses. And I think Trump has made that defense himself, basically. You couldn't be who Trump actually was, let alone who he pretended to be, without having mafia connections. Wayne Barrett, who writes a very critical book of him, which we're going to talk more about in a minute. He writes this book in 1992 called Trump, The Deals and the Downfall. Spoiler alert. They reprinted in 2016 ahead of the election. He adds a foreword to it. And he has a couple paragraphs in there where he argues pretty convincingly that you couldn't get anything done in New York defense is, and he points to how many people involved in organized crime, for instance, have apartments in Trump Tower. So it is like so much of Trump's career. And this is a theme we've already talked about, even in his childhood. how do you look at it? The people around him are just going to go, oh, well, yeah. I mean, he knew people in the mob, but everybody in New York in 1979 knew people in the mob. They were still a big deal, and they still controlled industries like concrete. Yeah. You're building a skyscraper, and you're like, well, I'm not going to be involved with the mafia, but I'm going to build a skyscraper. Okay, well, you're not building a skyscraper, man. That's not how it works.
And to believe the barrage of movies from the time and up through the 80s and 90s, you had to pay these people off. You needed to pay protection. You needed to pay all kinds of, kind of dodgy money to people to get anything built. So it's rather implausible that Trump was not on some way involved, not outright involved with the mob, but he would have had to probably use Roy Cohn, as are the allegations out there, that Roy Cohn was his go-between with, Godfather X, Y, or Z.
Cohn just sort of becomes his fixer in the terminology that we use here in general.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This relationship is huge. It begins professionally with this case, and it has a huge impact on Trump's life for sure.
We'll come back to Roy Cohn again. But apart from all this, it sounds like Donald Trump is going nowhere.
He has a ton of money by like normal people standards, but he's not Manhattan rich. He's not doing any deals. He's not building anything. He obviously wants to be a star, but the fact that his father's business has stalled out and is not doing anything is the big problem. But they get a break. In 1973, a man named Abraham Beam wins the election for mayor. Beam is not a very good leader. When he dies in 2001, this is just brutal. The Guardian opens his obituary this way. Quote, Abe Beam, who has died of complications due to open heart surgery aged 94, was one of the most ineffectual and derided mayors of New York City. That's the first line of his obituary, man.
Yes, I read that, yes. Pretty brutal, but probably fair, because under a mayor like that, the rules get a little bit looser. The gatekeepers get a little less imposing. In a power vacuum, opportunist people are going to strike and pounce.
Yeah.
And that's what Trump is starting to do here now, isn't it?
He has not started yet, but the opportunity creates itself under Beam, in part because what you're saying. He's ineffectual, which means that people underneath him kind of start pushing the rules and pushing their own agendas and making deals of their own. But more importantly, Abe Beam is literally a family friend.
Oh, wow.
Of the Trumps. Yeah. They are very close. Yeah. And in late 1973, for reasons that I don't think are clear, this is one of the funny things about doing this project is you're curious what Trump thinks and why he did things, but you can't, there's no reliable source. You can't. Right. Yeah. Anything he says, nobody asked him until he was big enough that he had already perpetuated the myth. So that's all out. And then most of the people he talked to, they have their own agendas, or they're interviewed 40 years later, things like that. So how exactly this happens? But he wants to buy the West Side Rail Yards, which is this huge property on the west side of Manhattan. What this is freight trains come in from across the country. There's all these tracks. They switch over to smaller trains that then move freight in and out of the city itself. It's just a tangled mess of train tracks and weeds. And in 1973, I'm sure all sort of illicit activity as well. The railroad that owns it has filed for bankruptcy. This is one of the most famous bankruptcies in the history of the country. It's Penn Central Railroad. They are so poorly run that when they start the process, literally the first thing they have to do is hire people to figure out what assets they own. The railroad owns land and buildings all over the country. Nobody even knows what it is. That's how bad this company is. And one of the trustees in that task, he gets a call from Donald Trump, and Donald Trump says, I want to buy the West Side Rail Yards. And the guy's like, yeah, that's great. Who the hell are you? And Trump goes, well, how about we go meet the mayor? And the trustee's like, excuse me? You're a 27-year-old guy I've never heard of. We're going to go meet the mayor. And the next day, Trump picks him up in his limo, and they go to the mayor's office, and Abe Beam is there. And he says to the trustee, whatever the Trumps want in the city, the Trumps get.
Well, reminds you of Fianna Fáil in the 1980s in Ireland. Anyway, go on.
It is this kind of a brazen level of corruption, certainly. Now, Trump is also starts inserting himself into media coverage. Again, it's not clear exactly why he's doing this, what his strategy is, but he tells reporters and makes a paper that he and Fred have acquired waterfront land in Brooklyn for $15 million for this massive project they're going to do. Not true. Becomes news that the ferry terminal in Manhattan that goes to Staten Island needs to be replaced. Trump goes out and he goes, I'm going to build a brand new terminal with a skyscraper and apartments and restaurants, and it'll cost $55 million. Like there's nothing behind that. He has not talked to anyone. He couldn't fund it if he wanted to, couldn't design it if he wanted to, but it makes the paper. And he is constantly talking and it winds up working. He winds up being mentioned in the media as a player in real estate. And in Lucky Loser, they explicitly point out he is mentioned in the New York Times. They call him, quote, a major New York builder. A major New York builder. A builder in one of the biggest cities in the world. He literally has not laid one brick. He has literally not even started a project at this point. And in the media, he's being portrayed as somebody who's a real player in real estate. And there's this massively Byzantine process in the rail yards. He has to negotiate. Barrett, who we mentioned just a minute ago, who is covering that time, he alleges that there's all sorts of corruptions and payoffs, and people want to buy the rail yards, and all of a sudden they stop, and then they pop up with a no-show job. It's so complex that you actually read it and go, well, actually, you got to give Trump a little credit for navigating this, like remembering who all these people are and paying off the right people and everything else. But this is his first deal. He acquires an option to purchase the rail yards for $62 million.
What's an option, Vincent?
I mean, it's a contract that says when he decides he can buy it.
Okay.
You know, so he has an option to buy it. You know, it might cost a couple $1 million. So, and then at any point over the next 2 years, he can go to the asset owner and he can say, let's go, I'm going to buy it for $62 million. If he changes his mind, he loses his money.
Okay.
And the rail yards is like a 30-year dream of Trump's. And it is like, you can see the appeal. It is at the time, the last parcel of truly undeveloped land in Manhattan. But the railroad owns another asset, and this is called the Commodore Hotel. It is a once great, now failing hotel near Grand Central Station. So this is on the east side of Midtown Manhattan. It has people squatting in some of the rooms. This is what we call it, where people just move in and stay in a place and illegally don't leave. There's drug addicts using it. There is a massage parlor, which offers additional services.
I wonder what they're.
Yeah, we maybe don't know, need to go into detail, but it is part of a neighborhood that is failing, that is falling into squalor, and part of a city that, as we'll discuss in a minute too, seems to be failing. And Trump runs the same playbook with the hotel as he did with the rail yards. He pulls every string that Fred has, every connection. He's got the mayor on his back. He uses Fred's money to hire all these consultants, the highest dollar, most politically connected people he can get, which gives the impression that he's a real player, right? He promises money, doesn't have. He goes to the city and says, well, look, this is a great deal, but I need a huge tax break. The people who are funding me, they won't do it if you don't give us a tax break. Now, there are no people funding him. He doesn't have that agreement, but he's also talked to the banks and he said, hey, look, if I get the tax break, will you guys fund me? He's playing everybody off himself, and he just goes around and around. He says at one point that he has an option to buy that property. This is just an outright lie. And there is also just a ton of corruption. Barrett covers this in detail, about all the machinations, and we're not going to get into them, but there's conflicts of interest. People in the deal help Trump out, and then when they leave, they're all of a sudden parachuting out into private practice and making a ton of money. There's all these kind of things that are familiar to anyone who's studied urban history, probably anywhere in the world, no doubt. There's no open bidding. Even though, there are people trying to get in, they keep it for Trump. And when it finally closes, it's a 40-year deal. It expires actually as Trump is running for president. And the city has given him an abatement on the property taxes. In return, he just pays a percentage of the profits. And by the time it expires after 40 years, the city has given up $410 million in potential tax revenue. Yeah, from the property.
Vincent, this is Trump's playbook here. Cosplaying at stuff is what he's doing here.
Cosplaying is a perfect word. Yeah, absolutely.
He's performing the role of builder, using the family name, the mayor's friendship, the relentless self-promotion, to talk himself into deals that he doesn't have the money or the options for. And this rail yard is his long-running fantasy project. And the Commodore Hotel, the one that actually lands a failing hotel in a failing neighbourhood, rescued with massive tax breaks, political muscles, and shady accounting that ends up costing the city hundreds of millions of dollars. Are other people getting these kind of deals, Vincent?
This is the best deal of the time.
Right. Okay.
We're going to talk in a second about the fact that the city is pretty desperate, so they do give some things away. But this is an outlier in terms of these kinds of deals, yeah.
Yeah, to many people, it's a bit of a sordid story, isn't it?
Look, there's outright corruption involved. I also don't think that's unique to Donald Trump.
No.
But people look at it and go, he's only in these rooms because of his father's connections. His father actually winds up guaranteeing the Commodore deal at one point. He's telling fibs. He keeps going. There's a convention center that New York wants to build to kind of get people back into the city. He proposes a project, again, another project which is almost fanciful, very little behind it, but another project gets picked, and all of a sudden he gets $1 million payout. Half of it is supposedly a brokerage fee for the deal. And everyone's like, what? People look back, he didn't broker this deal. Another $500,000 for promoting it, which is probably a little bit more understandable given what he's doing these days. And if you read his critics, they paint this as just pure corruption, start to finish. They really do.
Yeah.
Again, I keep doing these modest defenses of Donald Trump.
You should stop that.
I think it's a story where nuance is both required. It makes it more interesting. Oh, he didn't do anything. He didn't earn any of it. Nothing. He didn't accomplish anything. It can be a little overwrought because I do think if you try and step back and particularly look at it without political lens, it's a little impressive he pulled it off. It really is. I mean, he's bluffing everyone, and he's bluffing legitimate people, being an untested 27, 28-year-old guy and just going up to legit people and lying to their face. Like, hey, man, that takes some courage.
Well, I mean, it's obviously a proving ground for his future political career.
Oh, it's a proving ground for his business career, too, and for his entry in entertainment. But he does, I mean, he manages people well. He pushes people too far, and then he reels them back in. He's playing people off each other. Again, he has to have all these advantages, and he has to have Fred's backing and the beam machine and all these sorts of things. But in the context of those advantages, I think you actually do say, look, you got to give him a little bit of credit. Not all the credit, you have to give him a little bit of credit. Even if it's just stubbornness or narcissism or outright delusion, he keeps pushing. Again, a modest defense and some modest credit. You can see why the lesson he takes away from that is, I'm a brilliant negotiator, and I pulled it off, and I outsmarted everybody. Because he's not 100% wrong when he thinks that.
Yeah. So he's managed to close his first deal after all these years.
Yep.
So what else is going on with him at this time?
He finally gets agreement for this. It actually won't close for 4 years, believe it or not. It doesn't close till 1979.
Good.
Which is part of how complicated it is and part of how many strings he has to pull. We talked about how he is kind of sticking his nose into the media and into all these news stories to get attention, and it winds up working. He plays the media spectacularly well, and it culminates in November 1976. He's back in the New York Times, and this time he gets his own profile. In part 4, we'll talk more about that profile. Just a wild piece of journalism, but a piece of journalism that shows Donald Trump's playbook for making himself a star with the New York media. We'll discuss why the New York media was willing to play along and how, by the early 1980s, Donald Trump, on the back of minimal business success, had established himself as a legitimate national media star. We hope you'll join us for the next part in the series. We will most likely release these every Tuesday for the next few weeks, kind of here in the dog days of summer. Do our current event stuff on Friday, though if anything exciting or interesting happens, we will obviously adjust the schedule accordingly. For Toll McAdoo from the Irish Politics Newsletter, this is Vince Martin from Wall Street in Maine. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye now.